Thanks, Mr Deputy Speaker. On December of last year, the Select Committee inquiring into the child protection system in Tasmania presented its report. It contained 176 recommendations which were made to the government, not just for improvement but also for change. Mr Deputy Speaker, I have to say from the outset how proud we in the opposition are of our member in Franklin, our opposition spokesman for children, Mrs Petrusma. She has been a shining light on the scourge of our society where children have fallen through the cracks of a dysfunctional system and, sad to say, Mr Deputy Speaker, at the time, back in 2010 and 2011, a government that didn't want to be bothered with questions in this House about that failing system. And were it not for the tenacity of Mrs Petrusma in raising these issues in an entirely appropriate way, might I add, we would not be here today discussing the government's response to any report. The fact is that the Liberals at the time in 2010 pushed for a genuine commission of inquiry. We wanted it to have the powers that people understand in the community of having the powers of a royal commission, but it was thwarted by the Greens. If we'd have had the Greens to support at the time, we would have had a genuine commission of inquiry into this issue, but it was overturned when Labor and the Greens combined. They combined their numbers to overturn, to defeat the motion raised by the Liberals, by my leader Will Hodgman and my colleague Mrs Petrusma, and instead it was brought down to the level of a parliamentary inquiry. And it's very, very important. It's very, very important that we make that point, that the Liberals stood for a commission of inquiry. And that is a matter of record. And we're proud of that, and we stand on our record. And while people who were compromised at the time into agreeing to something that the government much preferred, we nonetheless make the point that we stand firm in the corner of the defence of Tasmanian children and to make sure that the best efforts were made to uncover the issues at play in order for us to genuinely get the best possible child protection system that Tasmania can have. Now, the Attorney-General makes a comment that it's not possible to have a perfect system. Well, we haven't been calling for a perfect system. We've been calling for a functional system, and one where Tasmanian children have the reasonable expectation that they'll be taken care of. But it seems no, that it was not so important as to result in any immediate action or response by the government when the committee that did eventuate handed down its 176 recommendations in December of last year. And one would have thought, with such a large number of recommendations made, that some of the more urgent ones could have been seen, even as a smaller subset, that they could have been considered urgent action items. And it's very sad to hear the chair of that committee, Mr O'Halloran, today apologising and making the case for the government, of which he's a part, that didn't occur. And I find that quite incongruous, given his position as the chair of the inquiry, that he's now apologising for the government for its delay in its response to that report. It's quite clear that the member for Braddon, Mr O'Halloran, is all part of the delay, because as it is, he comes into the parliament here today with a prepared speech, including some matters of detail that weren't even in the ministerial statement. He's been able to name all of the members of the Cabinet subcommittee. He couldn't have known that from the minister's statement because it wasn't in there. But the member obviously was fully aware of it beforehand, and to the point that he's even able to bring it in here.
You can raise a point of order from your seat.
Okay. Well, actually, the ones I named up were members of the Select Committee. That's who I know.
Mr Deputy Speaker, on a point of order, it's not a point of order.
You're member for Bass.
And Mr Deputy Speaker, I make the point in response to that frivolous point of order from the apologist for the Labor Party over there, that this document in my hand is what was placed on members' desks. And how dare you suggest otherwise? You're in it up to your neck. That's a fact. Member for Braddon, Mr O'Halloran, don't bring your theatrics over here. The reality is that you had more detail in your prepared speech than members of this House have had, and you're compromised and you know it. And to say that it's overdue, Mrs Petrusma says that the report being addressed by the government is 5 months overdue. I have to say is a polite term. That's polite to say the least. And let's remember that it was the events and public scandals of 2010 and before that has caused any inquiry at all to occur, and for us to be here today debating and noting the minister's statement. And I wonder, in those 5 months, and indeed in those 2 years, I wonder what pain and hardship Tasmanian children around our state have had to continue to endure as a result of a government that's more interested in itself, protecting its own standing and its own perceived reception in the community. And we can only imagine that things have indeed gotten worse, and that the system was very poorly positioned, given what we now know, very poorly positioned to deal with the budget measures now being felt across government, including, as Mrs Petruisma has made clear, that today, as a result of the minister's budget cuts, there are some 20 child protection worker positions that are currently vacant, and they're immediate vacancies ready, and they should be performing their role supporting Tasmanian children. Now, the fact of the matter is that this is a detailed statement, and we in the opposition, as Mrs Petruisma has made clear, we will go through in good faith what the minister has had to say today, and if there are good measures there, we'll support them. And if there are any measures there that the minister has ignored, in, for example, those 3 recommendations that they've rejected, if we don't agree with the government's position on that, we'll say so. But I do want to make the clear point again that Mrs Petruisma has made, and that is that we in the opposition stand shoulder to shoulder and affirm the work of the health professionals, the teachers, the principals, the social workers, the psychologists and school psychologists, the lawyers, the family support workers and the commissioners for children past and present, foster carers, indeed importantly parents and those organisations that care for children. We affirm and endorse their wonderful work and support that they have brought to Tasmanian children, however limited they are in being able to do that, and we thank them for their contribution to the inquiry.